Live edition here on the Rock Pile. Tonight we bring back the No Huddle podcast, and it's hard to believe we're down to our last two shows of the college football season. I have I was going to say Coach Medicis, but Coach Medicis is at practice. Coach Kramer's not available tonight. I completely was telling the guys tonight I screwed the date up. I've been so busy over the last 2 to 3 weeks. So tonight we'll have Coach DeCola on. We'll have Nick from CBus on. And then the last and final show, we'll confirm it. I'll post it. We're going to shoot for the 28th of December, where we'll go through the New Year's Six bowl games. We'll talk more in depth about the playoffs, the semifinal games, and much more. And we'll have the whole crew for that game. So tonight we will have the three of us. So let's bring everybody on. What's going on, guys?
What's going on, Coach?
I'll tell you, I was telling you guys, I completely botched this date up tonight with all the stuff going on. But as we said, we could always talk football. So as long as you guys were ready to roll tonight, I was definitely ready for sure.
Yeah, I don't know what we have to talk about, Rock. It's weird.
Well, I'll tell you what, Medicis was really mad because he said he was really going to come on hard on Ohio State tonight with you.
I said
we could save it. We could save it. But well, guys, we got a lot. I'm going to jump around a little bit, but as I was going through some stuff over the last couple of weeks, I know there's been some teams that have been that overachieved. There's been a lot of teams that underachieved, and I kind of want to start there first and talk about some of the the teams we're most disappointed with. And I guess one of the ones probably is, I think one of the obvious ones to me is Texas A&M. I know, they struggled, with the quarterback situation. I mean, Haynes King and Max Johnson were the two quarterbacks. And what I always find hard to believe is, really, when you go back to Jimbo Fisher's career at Florida State, I mean, outside of Jameis Winston, I think the knock's been he can't find and develop a quarterback at Texas A&M. They were preseason in the top 10, and they just really struggled throughout the season. What's happened at A&M?
I think, Rock, they took their big swing in the portal and with NIL last year, going into this season. I think it's a lesson that's going to be really interesting to see. Obviously, I'm sure we'll talk about your boy Primetime, a little bit later as well. But I think it's going to be a really fascinating case study to see some of these schools that are taking these really big swings in NIL and really throwing a lot of money around. Can you just compile talent now in college football and expect results? And I think A&M, being our first case study, I think we can argue the validity of how good of a coach Jimbo Fisher is. But I think even on top of that, you had guys smoking weed in the locker room. You had freshmen getting booted off the team. They had a ton of guys enter the transfer portal here. On Monday, when I look at where they're deficient, it seemed like a bunch of guys that just thought we have more talent than everybody else. We're going to throw our helmet out there and win. And by the time they realized that wasn't the case, the season's already half over and it's too late, right? I think it's an interesting.
I think that A&M team, even that that game against LSU, I think we got to give, and I know, and we'll get into some of the semifinal stuff tonight, but I know we'll talk a little bit about Lincoln Riley, and everybody used to joke and say big game Bob Stoops couldn't win the big game, and really Lincoln Riley got Oklahoma there a few times and didn't win it. But I give Lincoln Riley a lot of credit because he took all these guys from the portal, put them all together. They still overachieved, I think, at USC. Now, it helps when you got the quarterback. But when I look at Texas A&M, and I don't want to say the times passed Jimbo Fisher by where he's got to give up play calling duties. He's got to be more of a CEO and manage that team because, again, from a talent perspective, they had more talent than a lot of teams in college football. They just underachieved.
That's funny you say that he should give up play calling. I heard something interesting yesterday on one of the talk radios. It's like a lot of these head coaches now have to give it up to be invested in recruiting, NIL, and in the transfer portal. And it's almost like the head coaches don't have time to watch film. It's almost like you need to give it to the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinators, and let them and not worry about what's your first 15 plays. The thing is with Jimbo, I think as you see in college sports, the quarterback is a huge, huge position, and if you don't get that position right, it's going to hinder you. With Lincoln Riley, luckily he had his quarterback brought, and he made up for some of his play callings even. I think that's where a quarterback can use his feet or get him out of a play. It's just huge. And heck, we saw it with Clemson with DJ. So, and what was more surprising for Texas A&M is their run game. I mean, last couple of years, they've been, with the Spiller kid and the other one, they've been rushing, and had that toughness. And this year, it looks like like Nick said, that those guys didn't, hey, we just need to show up. That's it. We are preseason this, preseason that. We just need to show up and we'll be the big dog.
They were 105th in the country in the run game, this year, the Power 5. Can't win that way. Jake, who's a team that was a big disappointment for you?
I kind of got two. I mean, obviously Texas A&M, but I mean Baylor and Miami. Baylor goes out and wins their chip last year, has a lot of returners back, and they go 6-6 this year. And then even Miami, I know they got the new coach Cristobal coming in, but they had a freshman quarterback that looked good the year before, and then all of a sudden it's 5-7 and losing to Middle Tennessee and stuff like that. And it just, I know it's his first year and he needs to probably get some things corrected, but just to lay almost a goose egg, especially with some of the teams they faced, that it was, and getting blown out in some of them too, was probably Miami to me was the second biggest disappointment.
Well, that Tyler Van Dyke is supposed to be an NFL caliber quarterback to start the season, and then obviously Mario Cristobal, who I think is a really solid recruiter. They came in this year. Josh Gaddis, who was the offensive coordinator at Michigan, they were horrendous on offense. I mean, they were bad on offense. Turnover city over there. But again, I think you put all that talent together. It's really hard. And I say this all the time. It's really hard when you throw in all these 5-star recruits. It takes a special coach, I think, to be able to get those kids to work together with the NIL money. You're trying to put a roster together now. And C-Bus, I go back to when Ryan Day, before the season started, I think he said it's going to cost him $13 million or so to keep that roster together. When would we ever think college football, we would say it's going to cost X amount of dollars to keep these kids together? It's crazy.
Yep. Yeah, no, I'm with you. Miami was definitely on my list. I've talked about them a couple of times, this year already. I just, to me, it's the boy who cried wolf, right? Every single year I get to hear about how this is the time, this is the coach, these are the players. It's going to turn it all around, and they go absolutely nowhere. I had Baylor on my list. The other team I had on my list, honestly, was Oklahoma.
Yeah, good one.
I just feel like Venables was stepping into a program where, we're talking about Lincoln Riley and USC. The cupboard was not bare in Oklahoma. They play Texas in the Red River and get absolutely blown off the field. They don't score a point, in that game. They have a terrible loss to West Virginia. Granted it's in Morgantown, but they lose that game. They lose to Texas Tech at the end of the year. I look at that defense, that's supposed to be Venables' strength, right? They gave up 51 to Texas Tech. They gave up 49 to Texas. They gave up 55 to TCU. They gave up 38 to Baylor in a loss, right? I look at that team from where I felt like, look, I understand first-year coach and first time wearing that the big dog headset, but at the same time, man, that cupboard was not bare. And for them to lay an egg in the Big 12 like that was definitely alarming and a disappointment from my perspective.
Yeah, I would agree with you guys on both those two. And I'm a huge Dave Aranda guy. I was really disappointed in Baylor. I really thought Baylor. I mean, listen, Desmond Howard, I think, had Baylor, in the playoff, his crazy semifinals that he had. But I think Venables is in big trouble because he's going to lose a lot of guys off that team this year. Next year, I mean, you hate to see these guys saying, geez, could possibly make a coaching change after 1 or 2 years and buy these guys out. But Oklahoma's got the money to do it. And Venables would get a defensive coordinator job in a heartbeat anywhere. So I think he would be a hot name. But we'll see.
Take him right back in Clemson. What are you talking about?
Absolutely.
Dabo would pick up that. Dabo wouldn't have to pick up the phone. He'd just send the plane.
Guys, let's flip it and go. So we have some disappointed teams. How
Yeah.
about some of the most improved teams? And one of them I want to throw out there. What a job Kalen DeBoer did at Washington. Did anybody have Washington to start the year finishing what 11-2 or 10-2 in the regular season? I mean, Michael Penix comes over there in the season. Michael Penix could have probably been one of the candidates for the Heisman Trophy the way he played, down the stretch. But Kalen DeBoer comes over. They were 4-8 a year ago, and they turn around this year and they go 10-2. And I think they're going to play. I think I saw Texas. Did I see?
Yeah,
I think they're going to play in a bowl game.
I think that's right. Yeah, they do get Texas. I think I don't know what bowl game it is, Rock, but I'm pretty sure it is Texas.
And Penix just said he's coming back for another year, so beware. I think they're going to have another good year next year. C-Bus, who'd you have?
Yeah, I had a couple teams in this one. I had some fun with this. One of the teams that jumps out to me immediately is Tennessee, from the standpoint of just the 7-6 last year. Now all of a sudden jumped to 10-2. Their one terrible loss, from South Carolina to being in the playoff. So they jump out to me as kind of that obvious jump. But off the beaten path, I'm gonna go with Illinois. I know their record's only 8-4, right? So it's not like they won the weak side of the Big Ten. But to me, what a quick turnaround for a program that was just rutted for years, that could just not get out of their own way. Used to be a decent powerhouse of a school that you always had to make sure you played well and played hard. Bielema coming back to the Big Ten instantly brought credibility to that program, gave them an identity on the ground, tough physical defense. I think from an improvement perspective, especially knowing what was left there from Lovie Smith, I thought it was a fantastic quick turnaround for the Fighting Illini for sure.
On the radio,
you got a former Syracuse quarterback there.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Nick, on the radio last weekend, before preseason started, I went through. We did all the predictions. We always pick Syracuse, Colgate, Fordham. We do Michigan and Ohio State. We did Illinois, and I had them at 8-4. The guys laughed at me. Who had them 2-10, 4-8? Right. I had them exactly at 8-4. They should have beat Michigan.
Oh yeah, they had them. I was going to say they were in a lot of. Even those 4 losses, they were in a lot of games, right? They just ground you down. They played. It's definitely a team that I'm going to circle going into next year to say, okay, if Bielema is able to get some of his kids, which he will. They're going to be formidable as a mid to top tier team in the Big Ten, which will be a huge improvement for the conference because we need it.
Well, listen, I was happy to see Purdue win because I was saying the whole time I don't want to play Illinois in the Big Ten title game
twice. Yeah.
No, I didn't want to see it.
I don't blame you.
Jake, who was one of yours?
Well, I kind of got 2 right offhand. I mean, obviously, Tulane, the big green wave, went 2 wins last year. Now they're sitting on top with 11 wins. And,
playing in the Cotton Bowl.
Yep.
Yeah, big win.
And that's a huge turnaround. And then my next one is, a little bit scary since I'm a Clemson fan, but Florida State, what a turnaround.
Absolutely.
I mean, how much heat he got for they want Deion. I think he won 5 games last year. And to finish 9-3 and to beat some teams and got hot at the end. And it's now I think Travis is even coming back for next year. And, I think he's got that ship on the right direction. And it's a little bit scary for obviously Clemson being in the same class. But, everyone kept saying if Clemson played them at the end of the year, Florida State probably would have won that game. So,
we of course I was on the get Mike Norvell out last year and bring Deion in so he can bring some of those recruits over. But I'll tell you what, to finish 9-3 and to get the quarterback, every quarterback in the ACC, I think declared for the portal.
Yeah.
So I think next year Florida State's going to have a group that could be really special in the ACC. I love the Tennessee thing. C-Bus, I know you said Tennessee. You guys know I've been on the Josh Heupel train for the last couple of years, and I still think Tennessee should have finished ahead of Alabama because they beat them head to head. And you're right. I mean, they have the loss to South Carolina, which basically took them out of the playoff. But here's the other crazy thing: It took Hendon Hooker with the injury out of the Heisman. He should be at the presentation this weekend. How is he not?
I don't know. I don't know how you can't make that 5 guys and bring him to New York for. I don't care if he's on crutches or not. It seemed absolutely ludicrous to me that they left him.
No,
they left him off the board.
And I think Florida State's going to play Oklahoma. I think they're in the Cheez-It Bowl. I think
there you go. There you go.
Which
could be some funny commercials in that one at least.
I was going to say for sure. the other one I had, guys, I think it's really an obvious one, is and I said it on my little short videos. But what about the job Sonny Dykes though at TCU?
Oh yeah.
I mean, to walk in there and Gary Patterson, who was there for a long time, they were kind of the last 2-3 years not the same old TCU. They started Chandler Morris, the quarterback, and then in comes this Max Duggan, who's now a Heisman candidate, has the year that he had. And I think Sonny Dykes is a great coach. I'm kind of disappointed that they're going to play Michigan because I want to see TCU keep winning because everybody just keeps betting against them. And again, the game against Kansas State, it's tough to beat a team twice.
For sure. Rock, the other one I thought we left off the list that, I'd be remiss not to bring in is also Kansas. All right. Kansas 2-10 last year, 1-8 in the conference, and able to get to 8-4. I know they struggled towards the end of the year. I think they lost 3 in a row as they kind of limped home.
Well, they had that injury to their quarterback.
They lost Daniels, and really kind of fought through that. But another program that really looked, on the bottoms of the conference, always on the bottom of the conference, and quick turnaround. And I thought they were a really nice surprise to watch them play consistent football, really for the first 2 months of the year.
And got College Game Day to go there for.
Right. When's the last time they get to say that? Ever got to say that?
Well, which leads me into some of the guys for Coach of the Year. And when would you ever think a head coach at Kansas would turn down some of these other jobs to stay at Kansas? So, I mean, one of my Coach of the Year, obviously Lance Leipold at Kansas. I mean, they ended up 6-6, but listen to this one: 2-10, 0-9, 3-9, 1-9. That's the last 3 or 4 years at Kansas. Now, I know people are going to say they got off to a really good start. They're still going to go to a bowl game. But, you guys said it. College Game Day was there. I mean, I think he's done a really good job. I mean, I thought that other than Kansas, to me, UConn, and UMass for the last so many years, probably the 3 worst programs in the entire country.
Yeah, I don't think that's a stretch.
And I think we always talk about, what was it, Mangino at Kansas? To play in the Orange Bowl when he was there. They haven't been good since, and that's probably, 10, 12 years ago, I think.
At least.
With Mangino. So Leipold was one of my Coach of the Year. And then obviously the other one for me, I think, is Jim Moore at Connecticut. I know people can laugh and say, Jim Moore at Connecticut, but Connecticut was horrible. Connecticut was one of the worst programs. They were 1-11, 2-10 the last couple of years, 0-10, 2-9, and he goes 6-6. And, they had a pretty big win over Liberty, that last game of the year. So I think Jim Moore did a hell of a job at UConn.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. The one for me is Sonny Dykes, right? I just think if you're telling me National Coach of the Year, where I'm looking at, right? They, like you talked about, I think you covered pretty well, but started outside of top 25, right? Got to the undefeated record, stubbed their toe a little bit there late in the Big 12 title game. But even still, I mean, what a fight for that team. All those come from behind wins. And even again, they repeated the same exact model that they've done all year in that Big 12 title game. They're down 8. They find a way to get a score. They find a way to get their 2-point conversion. They come up just a little bit short in overtime. But to me, to step in for Patterson, who had been there, to really just to grab an identity with that team and keep them there. We're all waiting. The whole year I'm waiting for TCU to stub their toe, right? That's what they've done traditionally forever. And they just didn't do it. They refused to do it, and they find themselves rewarded in the CFP. Just a great story, and definitely would be my pick if I had a vote.
Jake, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think Sonny Dykes is probably the first one, but a couple of coaches that are off beaten. I mean, like I said, here's one for you: the James Madison. I know I'm gonna say his last name wrong. It starts with a Kagensi or something.
Yeah.
Talk about coming into the big boys for the first year and went basically went in their their conference, but can't go to the championship game because of the whole legislation of there's a 2-year ban when you get moved up. But it was a SBF did great things down there, but it's their first year and went basically 8-3 this year and couldn't play in the championship game and let Coastal go, and they beat Coastal that one the last game of the year. So, and then obviously I said it earlier, the Tulane coach Willie Fritz.
Yep.
That huge turnaround, winning 2 games before to now 11 games and playing in a New Year's Day bowl game, and huge turnaround.
Well, you guys said most of mine. I had Lance Leipold. I think we talked about Josh Heupel, the job he did. Sonny Dykes, you mentioned. I still think you got to give Lincoln Riley a lot of credit in year one at USC, putting that roster together. I had Jim Moore, and then I am going to be a homer. I'm going to throw Jim Harbaugh out there just because he replaced both his coordinators on that. So when you replace both those coordinators to have the season that they did, I'm going to give him some credit here over at Michigan. So a lot of coaching changes. Brent Key, who played at Georgia Tech, got the Georgia Tech job. Trent Dilfer, I think everybody, including myself, was surprised to see that he got the UAB job. Tom Herman at FAU. GJ Kinney, I don't know if you guys remember him. He played at Tulsa, got the Texas State job. Jeremy Chadwell, Coach Chadwell, was going to go over to Liberty. Of course, we'll talk about primetime. Matt Rule, a lot of coaches on the move. Fickle, I'm sure we'll talk about him. But let's start with Prime. I watched, and I'm sure you guys did too. You guys watched the team meeting that he had, and he said he's bringing his luggage, he's bringing his guys. Announced his son. I'm kind of torn on that. I don't have a problem with a coach being upfront, honest with his players. He's going to need some of those Colorado players because he's not bringing in 100 kids. But that's Deion. When I thought about this, because I didn't think Colorado was a good fit for him when I saw him get that job, but now I think I'm going to switch gears and say this. I think the reason why he didn't get the other jobs, I don't think they want the drama. They don't want the reality show stuff. I don't think they let him be Prime. I thought everything you saw at Colorado, and I think I just saw an article before we came in, Instagram, all the social media is blown up. Sales have already blown up. Ticket sales, memorabilia, everything has like tripled since Deion's went there. But they better be ready for all the drama, the bright lights, the cameras, the social media stuff. I think that's really the main reason. You guys can let me know what you think. That's why Auburn and some of those other schools might not have came after him, because I don't think they wanted him to be Prime. Is he's going to be able to do? He's going to do whatever he wants in Colorado. There's no doubt about it, right?
Yeah, I don't. Go ahead, Jake. No, you're good.
Sorry. That's why I think Colorado kind of gave him that blank slate and said, "Go ahead, you do what you got to do, get us back on track. You have full reign, with the AD and everything." Where a program like Auburn on that, they're going off this is history. We've always been competitive and everything, and I guess you never know behind the scenes what's like Auburn with those boosters. There could have been like, no, we don't want someone like that to come in that's going to tell us no, and not. We want to have more say. They want to do more stuff with the program, which how they make their money. But for something like Colorado to make a huge splash like that, that's great. And what Deion saying in that speech for his room, which any coach has the right to say that, I just wish at the end it says, this is the way I'm going to coach. This is how we're going to do. If you don't like it, obviously there's a transfer portal. But if you're here and you want to do something special, and work your tail off, I want you to be here.
Exactly.
And kind of give players there a little bit of love. I think that's the problem where he just went in and is like, bringing my own luggage. Here's my starting quarterback, my son. It's like, don't you want your son to work for it kind of and not just be handed to it a little bit? But, that transfer portal, I know he's probably going to hit that hard more than the recruiting. So he'll probably bring in a lot of transfer. And like Nick said earlier, we're going to see how well that's all going to fit together.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I think the other aspect is like, you're not going from an HBCU to Auburn. Like, you have to take an intermediary step. You got to prove it to me that you can win now, at a decent clip in the
Mm-hmm.
Pac-12, right?
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's some of it. I agree with you. He brings the lights, he brings the swag, and there's going to be, Jake, I think you brought a good point. There's going to be boosters and there's going to be old money in these big time programs that are going to resist that, but they're not going to resist that if he goes 10-2 for 2 straight years in Colorado. They're going to say, okay, we've seen it. We see that you've proven it now in 2 separate locations. Let's go. Right. So to me, this is a necessary next step. If depending on how far he wants to take this from a coaching perspective. I'm with you guys. The speech didn't necessarily bother me. I get the mindset and the mentality that he's trying to drill into those guys. But I do think he missed that really key last point, right? Hey guys, look, if you don't like it, there's no problem. There's no hard feelings. You can go. I'm bringing in my own guys. But if you want to be here, I got a spot for you, right? Like, you got to earn it. But you're welcome to stay, and I hope that you stay, right? I think that was a little bit, of that drop off there. But there's no doubt the lights, the swag that he's going to bring, the kids that he's going to grab there, it's going to be fascinating. Him grabbing Mike Zimmer as a D coordinator is a fantastic hire. For him to have somebody that has NFL experience and somebody that has head coaching experience as well. I don't think he's going to have any issue there of assembling talent. And let's be honest, depending on how long he stays at Colorado, when USC and UCLA come to the Big Ten, there's gonna be some big boys that are gonna move out of his way in that conference that might give him a chance to make a run for a couple of years before maybe he takes that next step.
I think it's one thing when he's at the Jackson State, and he can recruit. I had to go back and look. I wanted to see what Shador was, his son, as far as a 3-star, 4-star. His son was a 4-star recruit. I'm going to be interested to see what he can do with other Power 5 against 4- and 5-star recruits. Because when you throw these guys on Jackson State, he's beating everybody. But now he's going to have to recruit, against the country, against everybody. I think he'll win there. I think, listen, they're already saying the College Game Day or the Big Ten kickoff, they open up against Nebraska. Matt Rule against Dion week 1. Don't be surprised if game day's at that one, week 1 of the college football season. But I'm just anxious to see what he does. One thing about Prime, I think we all know, he's got that confidence in him. He'll instill winning, but winning for Colorado, maybe it's 6-5, 7-5, which, listen, if they go to a bowl game, it would be huge. So I think he'll win. I just wasn't a big fan of how he handled it. Maybe if he would have added, Jake, what you said, that's what I was waiting to hear, because it's not those kids' fault. That's who their coaches recruited. I mean, I'm sure those kids played their heart out. They just weren't good. So the other one I want to ask you guys about this. So Matt Rule in the Nebraska, which I kind of figured that. I think it's a pretty good fit for Matt Rule. But Cbus, I got to ask you, I was really surprised at the Luke Fickell move. I know with the Big Ten ties, since he's going to the Big 12 with Oklahoma coming out, I just thought that Cincinnati, there would be more money in the pool for coaches for him. Does he just want to get back to the Big Ten? Is he setting himself up possibly down the road for Ohio State if something happens with Ryan Day? I didn't get that one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. Part of me thought that was when I first read that he was going to interview there and they were taking a swing. My initial reaction was I don't see it. The more I thought about it, right? It's another really good step for Fickell. I agree with you. I think with Cincinnati moving to the Big 12, but I think there's also there's also a little bit of trepidation in the Big 12 when you really kind of look at it. We know where the SEC's going. They're going to grab Oklahoma, Texas. We know the Big Ten is grabbing, a couple schools. It's really aligning and continuing to grow of these two kind of super conferences, and everybody else kind of left, there. And so I think that has to be a little bit of a draw. I think the other thing you look at with Wisconsin is it does fit really that college town that Fickell really likes. He doesn't have to be, he's not going to be in a major market spotlight. And absolutely, there's no doubt, Rock, that his job that he would go tomorrow would be Ohio State, right? If they came calling, he's there, and it's a great chance for him to rebuild that program a little bit and see what he can do, going up against Big Ten competition week in, week out. Jim Leonard, there was a whole big talk. Jim Leonard was going to stay. And then he finally announced that he's gone. I think it'll be interesting to see, where he goes. He has Mike Tressel on the staff, which will be, was another good coup for him to take over from Cincinnati. So, I look at it from the whole coaching carousel. The winner to me was the Big Ten. All right. When I really look at it, I think Matt Rule is a fantastic fit in Nebraska. I think I talked about that, 4 or 5 weeks ago when that job came up. He's a perfect program, builder, exactly something that Nebraska needs. And then you add Fickle to Wisconsin. I think he'll get them turned around pretty quickly. And then you add in what Bielema is doing in Illinois, and then you're going to add USC, UCLA. We're going to go from, hey, the Big Ten was, Ohio State, Michigan, and everybody else, to now all of a sudden, I think in a couple of years, it's not a stress that we're going to sit there and go, oh, man, there's 5 or 6 programs that are traditionally pretty darn good, right? So I'm excited with the way that the carousel kind of landed for the Big Ten. I thought it was a huge win.
Jake, you know what I was thinking, and I'll throw this at you first, and then Nick, you can jump in. But when I looked at both those, and I don't disagree, I think for Wisconsin, home run hire to get Luke Fickell. I think Matt Rule's a great get for Nebraska. Is going to bring toughness, maybe the old school Nebraska of old that come into the Big Ten, play solid defense, tough up front. But I was thinking about that if the Big Ten goes – they get away from the 2 conferences, right? That's still the talk. They're going to do away with the Big Ten East and West, which I think would be awesome. If they do that, you'd have to think Wisconsin and Nebraska. Nick, once they bring USC and UCLA over, they're probably the 6th or 7th best team in the Big Ten. Now, if it was still the Big Ten West, I think Fickell's a home run. I think he's got a shot to play for the Big Ten title every year. But insert the other 2. Those are probably the 6th, 7th, 8th best teams in the Big Ten. So I think it's going to be tough coming over right away for both those coaches, Jake.
Yeah, but I think he's got that for a couple of years, being on the other side of Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, and to get to Wisconsin back there. I think you'll see a lot of similarities with Cincinnati and Wisconsin a little bit in his style of coaching. So I think he saw that it's easy enough for him to go in. It's not a huge culture change, style of play, and all that stuff. So I think he can have success right away. And that's why I think he kind of jumped. And like Nick said, I think he wants to get back into that type of conference to show. And he's very familiar with that conference, playing there and coaching in and everything. And, when you're familiar with something, it's a little bit easier sometimes to go back to it.
Guys, the one I don't understand, I didn't understand the Chadwell move from Coastal Carolina to Liberty, especially with down the road that the 12-team playoff expansion. I just didn't see that Liberty's that much of a better job than Coastal Carolina, unless Chadwell said to himself, listen, I've achieved everything I can possibly do at Coastal Carolina. I want a new opportunity. But is Liberty, Nick, really a better job than Coastal?
Boy, I can't imagine
I didn't get
it is. Yeah, I didn't either. I thought it was definitely a lateral, felt lateral to me. The other thing we need Badisas to tell me about where Coastal is on from a recruiting perspective and where they may have in, and maybe he looked at just the way graduating class was falling and he felt like, hey, look, this is a good time for me to make another move with just where we're at, maybe program wise. Maybe he saw a little bit of a dip and thought his stock maybe might have dipped with it and felt like, okay, maybe this is my move here. I go and pick up Liberty, carry them, and then maybe I parlay this into into another piece. The other thing we didn't talk about, Jeff Brom going to Louisville, right? Which I thought was interesting, leaving Purdue to go to Louisville, right? What is that, Rock? What's your thought process there? Because I've always felt like Purdue was, this other kind of tantalizing team where they show you flashes for a year and you think maybe they're going this way and then they kind of fall back down. I'm curious as to where your headspace was on that one.
I just hope it's not like the Scott Frost, the Jim Harbaugh piece where he wanted to go home, where he played and see if he can kind of turn it. I thought Louisville under, what was it, Satterfield before? Yeah. I didn't think he did a bad job, but I guess when I look at both those programs, I think I got to look at the conference. What's going to be the scope of the ACC over the next couple of years? Yep. Are there going to be some teams? I mean, they're talking Clemson may jump to the SEC. You might see Florida State, jump to the SEC. I mean, who knows? But man, that's another one. I just don't know if that's a better job than Purdue. And listen, I thought he did a great job at Purdue. Again, the Big Ten West, Purdue's got a shot every year.
Yep.
So I was a little surprised. I mean, the only thing I guess I can possibly say, Nick, is that he's going to come on a press conference and say, listen, I passed on it, a couple years ago. I
Yep.
get another opportunity to go back home to where I played. He's probably still got family there, friends there. So that's probably all I can think of. But I think they're both middle of the pack jobs. I just think Purdue right now is a better job.
I heard, what I read, who might be interested in the Purdue job.
Who's that?
Former wide receiver coach at Purdue. I think first name's Dino, last name Babers. There's been a little talk that Purdue might be giving the old Q's a call to see maybe if
I did not hear that.
Yeah, I thought I read that this evening. I was my eyes perked up a little bit. So
I think Medicis would be the
that.
first to help pay for.
I was gonna say he might be driving the
Donate
Mayflower
to
truck
fund.
over to over to Babers' house and help him pack.
Well, that brings me. You guys read my mind, Nick, because one of my first buy or sell was going to be is Dino Babers back in Syracuse next year. They're going to the Pinstripe Bowl. Seems like every time they make a bowl game, it's the Pinstripe Bowl, which I think Minnesota hammers them because they're going to run the football, and Syracuse can't stop anybody. But is he back next year? Are you buying or selling it?
Oh, I'm buying it. I think he gets one more year. I think next year's probably his swan song. I think he did just enough the early part of this year for 6 and 7 weeks to kind of give the fan base a little bit of hope and give that alumni a little bit of hope. I just think, he's got a recruiting gap that he can't really close in Syracuse. He has a facilities gap that he can't close necessarily in Syracuse as well. So I think he gets one more year. Unless Purdue drops the money bag off at his front door for Christmas. But I'm going to buy that. Say he's back one more year.
Jake, how about you?
Yeah, he's going to be back. I mean, last year they didn't go to a bowl. This year they eligible for a bowl, which is a huge, extra practices and everything. And he started the season off hot, so that's something you can always build off of, and playing Clemson close and being right there. Now, I'm not sure if their quarterback, is he back next year?
He is staying. They just said Schrader's going to stay. Yep.
So, and that's huge right there. Obviously if Purdue comes calling, I can't see him, knowing he's in a little bit of hot water at Syracuse. And if Purdue comes calling and wanting him, I wouldn't be surprised he jumps ship. But also with Syracuse, how about the not going to the Fenway Bowl because of finals? They use that term.
I was laughing. I said, they don't take finals whenever.
Well, my thing was, if Syracuse ever got good, God forbid they have a home playoff game when they get to the 12th.
What are they going to do with that?
They can't go to Syracuse. They have finals.
I mean, listen, I'm going to buy it too, only because they're not going to pay his buyout. But I'll tell you what, if you go back to C-Bus, what you're saying about the Purdue thing, Syracuse beat Purdue. I think it was the second game of the season. So they beat Purdue. And I was really waiting for Medicis to give me holy hell, because I thought he was going to say Michigan and Syracuse have two common opponents now, Purdue and Connecticut. I was waiting for that message, but I'll buy it. I don't think he's going anywhere unless if Purdue comes calling. So I'll buy that. Guys, buy or sell. Caleb Williams wins the Heisman Trophy. Jake, I'll start with you first on that one.
That's hard because, he played well all season, but the problem is if you're not a true diehard football, you didn't see a lot of his games. You only got to see his last two before his championship game, and he was on fire against Notre Dame and UCLA, which put his stock up high. And then that last game, even though he was hurt, he still played somewhat pretty well. But what's the TCU quarterback?
Duggan.
Yeah,
Duggan.
Just the way he's come back over and over, I think it's almost a toss-up. But I think I'm going to go with a little bit more flashy, that the more throwing yards, the rushing and everything, and go with Caleb.
C-Bus, how about you?
Yeah, I'm buying that. I think he closed really well. I think so much that Heisman race is how well you close the season. And I thought he closed out really well. Pac-12 championship, be darned, dinged up a little bit, but I thought what a monster season. What do you have? 41 touchdowns and four interceptions.
Yeah.
I mean, that efficiency to me is just that's bananas. So from my perspective, if I had a vote, I'm definitely buying it. It's him.
Yeah, I would too. I think it's unfortunate that, and listen, Stetson Bennett, those guys that are there. I mean, he's great story. He was a walk-on quarterback, wins a national championship last year. Really good shot. They're favored to win another one this season. We'll see how it plays out. I know Hendon Hooker had the injury, and I know that's the last impression we have is them losing. He should have been there. Blake Corum, if Blake Corum didn't get hurt at Michigan, maybe he should have been there. Again, I'm not knocking the guys that are there. I think, unfortunately, Nick, I think C.J. Stroud put up great numbers, but everybody's got the last impression
Oh yeah,
is the Michigan game. So I think that takes him out. Max Duggan, another one who great season. Last impression is they got beat in the championship game. So unfortunately, I think that's going to hurt those guys. I think Caleb Williams probably is the best player in the country, but Hooker should have been there. Corum should have been there. I think the other guys definitely deserve to be there, but I would say Caleb Williams. It depends on when these guys put their votes in. I think the votes had to be in before he played that Pac-12 title game against Utah.
No, it had to be Sunday.
Yeah, it was Sunday.
Okay,
Yeah,
so they got
so
they had a chance.
If you submitted before the championship game, I know talk radio, they're all like, you shouldn't do it because it's still an extra game that you can ball out or it could hurt you. But I know some people said, no, it's the regular season. They'll submit it before that. So,
yeah, I'm with you though, Rock. I think, that's why I said it's a closing award, right? I mean, it's how well how well you play. I think the other thing that helps Caleb, honestly, and typically teams out west, you always wonder, like, did they get enough eyes on them to really be able to? But I think what helps Caleb is we can all flash back to last year and at Oklahoma, right? And we know what a player and how well he played at times last year. And I think that does nothing but help boost him this year because you do have that to draw off on now. And I think it actually helps. Like, okay, I've seen him do it now in two places and in USC where they were struggling historically for the last 10 years or so. So yeah, to me it's a no-brainer, but I would have loved to see Corum there and I would have loved to see Hooker there too. I think both were deserving. There's no reason they had to limit it to 4 in my perspective.
And guys, how about Bryce Young too? Bryce Young has the injuries. Alabama's got the 2 losses. You never know if he doesn't get hurt.
Yeah, at least his play, at least his numbers weren't nearly as robust as they were last year. At least I can make the argument that he didn't have the season that he had last year, and that's why it's so dang hard to repeat, and it's really hard to get there twice, right? Even in the nominated. So that's a big one.
C-Bus, I'll start with you. We talked a little bit about Deion, but you buying or selling the Deion wins right away at Colorado?
I think I'm going to buy it. I mean, I'm not going to tell you he's going to get 10 wins, but I think 8 wins. 8 wins is a realistic number next year. I think he's going to recruit his tail off here this year. I think he's going to capitalize on that hype. I think the transfer portal will flow there. Like I said, I like some of the veteran leadership coaching wise that he has there. I think there'll be bumps in the road for sure, but if I can say win right away is 8 wins, I definitely would buy that.
Jake, how about you? You buying it?
Yeah, I'm going to buy it. I think he's going to be around 500 or so. I mean, you got programs that are changing their coaches there, Arizona State, Stanford, and, who knows what else falls down the thing. So, and it helps that he's bringing in his own son as quarterback that's probably familiar with how he coaches and it could be a leader in the locker room that helps those guys. And the staff he's putting together is pretty talented too.
I'm going to buy it. If we didn't have the transfer portal, I would say there's no way he has a chance. But after seeing what Lincoln Riley did, I mean, kids are going to go and want to play for Deion. Can you just imagine as a high school kid, you got Deion Sanders in your living room or you're on the phone, you got a shot to go play with him? I'm going to say yes. I think even if he goes 6-6, anything is better than 2-10, 1-10, the last 2 to 3 years. So I do think he'll win. How many wins? I don't know, but I think anything's going to be better than what they've been.
Heck, it's more like he's a GM now.
Exactly.
With the transfer portal. All right, hey, I got this type of money for you and all this stuff and promising all that stuff.
You guys, the last thing I just wanted to end with, and the final show will really break down the 2 semifinal games. We'll talk about the New Year's 6. I just want to get your guys' thoughts. I did a video with my playoff 4. I got it right. I'm sure a lot of us got it right. But some people, the debate was, Ohio State, the debate was 5-6. Who was going to get that last 4 spot? TCU loses. They didn't drop for, I think, first time ever. They said a team lost late in the year and didn't get dropped at all. Going into it, I said, win or lose, I thought Georgia, Nick, you and I were going back and forth. I said, I thought Georgia, Michigan, TCU were in regardless if they won or lost. I just kept saying, don't put Ohio State against Michigan. I don't want to see a semifinal game. But I thought the committee got it right. And I think they got it right because there really was, you couldn't put a 2-loss Alabama in over a 1-loss Ohio State. You couldn't make me the argument that they belonged in. So there really wasn't anybody behind those two that you could even consider saying should have been there. So Nick, did you agree with the 4?
Yeah, I agree with the 4. I think you and I were joking, right? And I texted back and forth, and I chuckled when I started hearing this groundswell for Alabama. And it just, to me, under no circumstances can you tell me that 2 losses is better than 1. I just, you lost 2. It's a win-loss business, right? I mean, that's, we all say you are what your record is, right? So, from that perspective, I think they got it right. I think the TCU thing is fascinating. I know I listened to the head of the CFP there to say, they never really in the room talked about, Ohio State versus Michigan, putting Ohio State at 3. They didn't entertain matchups. I find that hard to believe. I think from an eyes perspective and from a ratings perspective, you'd much rather see if that game were to happen. I don't know, A, if I could survive it, but B, if it were to happen, you need that to happen in your national title game because you won't have a bigger ratings game than that. But I also think, we look at TCU and it's like you did lose to a 3-loss team. Granted, I understand you lost in overtime and you lost in a neutral field, but you did lose to a 3-loss team. The last game of the year. I remember well enough. Ohio State dropped the spot, in the CFP, and they beat Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game, and they dropped the spot from 2 to 3, or I think from 3 to 4, 2 to 3 in that scenario, right? So I feel like they like to pick and choose what matters to them, in relationship. But overall, I think they have the right 4 teams. I could bicker a little bit about 3 and 4, but in the grand scheme of things, I think they got it.
Jake, you think they got it right?
Yeah, I think they got it right. Only because if TCU, if they didn't have that overtime loss, if they actually got blown out even by 2 touchdowns, I could see Alabama moving up very easily. Yeah. But the hard part is as a Tennessee and even a Clemson fan, knowing that South Carolina ruined both of those seasons, Clemson with the 1 point,
Clemson
they could have
has
been
a great
right
argument
there. And if they had put
argument.
the Cade Klubnik in, who knows? We could have been in that 4th seed, and even Tennessee sitting there. But it just shows you how important every game is, and it is hard to put it. Like Seba says, they had 2 losses. Yes, it's only by 4 points, where Ohio State did get blown out, and I think that's the 3rd largest blown out that someone's made the championship game with. But it is still 2 losses, and even though it's ranked teams, but with TCU not dropping, they didn't. They had to look at that, and they didn't want a rematch.
I'll tell you what. The only I hated that I had to listen to Nick Saban politic of why Bama should have got in the playoff at halftime of I forget which game it was. Might have been the Utah. Was it the Big Ten game?
It was the Big Ten game. Speaking of that, Rock, I couldn't understand why on earth the Big Ten, Fox, who has the Big Ten, doesn't show any SEC games, gives Saban 10 minutes on their halftime show to politic for him. I thought, who was making that decision? I just thought that was
the only
argument to me.
The only argument that I didn't disagree with Nick Saban on, but it's really not an argument because, again, the way this playoff, the committee is, his argument was, well, if you put us on paper, a neutral field and play TCU, who's favored? Alabama's probably favored, but maybe 2 touchdowns. I didn't disagree with that, but you can't penalize a TCU team that went 12-0 and loses in the conference champion. And that's why I've had TCU over Ohio State, Nick, because I said TCU got to the championship game and lost. Ohio State didn't get there. So that's why I didn't have a problem with putting TCU over Ohio State because of that. But I don't disagree with Saban saying that, hey, listen, if we put it in a neutral field, Alabama might be favored against Michigan, TCU, and Ohio State in those 3 games. But I'll tell you what, and I know we'll break these games down, but Nick, I got to tell you, Kirby Smart didn't want to see Ohio State at 4 because I think right now the line is like, I think it was 7 the last I saw.
6.5, 7, yeah.
Ohio State can beat Georgia.
Maybe.
Ohio State can beat Georgia. If Ohio State is healthy, Ohio State can score points. How about if it ever happened, Michigan and Ohio State for the national championship game?
I don't know if my heart could take it, Rock. But the thread I want to pull on, and you mentioned it, is the conference championship games, right? It is the conference championship pieces. I don't understand where now all of a sudden it's, well, I mean, yeah, you made the conference championship game, so that's good enough. Like, is it? Like, we've always said conference champion, not participant in the conference championship game. So to me, where I and especially when I look at like the Big Ten, Rock, as an example, my counter argument for Ohio State was, yeah, you're right, they didn't make it to the Big Ten championship game. But is that because they weren't the second best team in the Big Ten? Or is that because we've already talked about they have 2 divisions and their divisions are all lopsided, and you had a 5-loss Purdue team, back their way into the Big Ten championship game, right? So when I hear that, it just drives me a little batty to say, like, well, it's like to say, to me, you have to make the same argument for USC. Well, USC, you made it to the Pac-12 championship game. You lost, so now you have 2 losses. But I mean, you didn't make it, and Ohio State didn't. So so to me, it's a real slippery slope of, like, if we're going to look at it that way, then either cut the rankings off at the end of the regular season and the conference championships are just for seeding, or get rid of conference championship games altogether and just have the regular season end. To me, it's one or the other. But to me, the kind of, oh, well, I mean, because it's like, it felt very well, listen,
selective. If you had USC undefeated, all 4 of those teams would have been in, which goes back to the point where you say to yourself, a conference championship could cost a team millions of dollars. If they lose, they're out. So I had said, geez, if USC was undefeated, and again, that's the only reason why you can eliminate Alabama and USC is they had 2 losses. And if you looked after that, there was really nobody that had any argument to get in. So I really thought it was down to these 4 teams, and that was it, period. You couldn't put a 2-loss Bama. And I just think it's going to be a better playoff because I think Georgia and Ohio State's going to be a really good game. Michigan's a 9-point favorite, but I'll tell you what, TCU can score, man. TCU's going to score points. So my question is this for you guys. With these 4 teams, obviously, Nick, if it's Michigan, Ohio State, the ratings would go through the roof. And I'd have to listen to my wife because I could easily see it to where Michigan wins the regular season, Ohio State beats them for the title, and my wife's on me saying, hey, we beat you when it mattered most. As much as I say I want to see it, I don't want to see it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Rock. I don't know if I want to see it either.
But for ratings, I think you'd have to say Michigan, Ohio State would be awesome. But the other one, you look right now, Vegas has Michigan, Georgia for the national championship. So the other question, we talk about how they paired the 4. Did they pair it this way because college football and everybody wants to see Michigan, Georgia? I think Michigan would be a 10-point or a 10-point dog or 2-touchdown dog to Georgia.
Oh, I think so too. I'm with you. I mean, I think, in my opinion, and like you said, we'll break this down further in a couple of weeks. If every team plays their best game, I think Georgia's beating everybody else in there by 10 points or more. And I don't think to me, it's just not up for debate. Now, we all know these are college kids. They're 18 to 22, right? And there is nothing to say that they're going to play their best game when it matters the most. But I think there's juicy storylines really in all of them minus TCU, right? I think you got Ohio State, Michigan, we talked about. I think Georgia, Michigan would be a heck of a championship game just from the standpoint of you got last year to build off of. You have Michigan now. Can Harbaugh really complete and really bring them back to a legit national title, which they haven't had in 50 some years, right? I don't want to hear about the split 97 title, right? A legit title. Like, to me, there's plenty of juice, within that buzz. And then you also have the repeat factor, right? Now all of a sudden, we can really say, okay, Georgia's unseated Bama, right? The mentee has graduated from the mentor, has taken over Georgia, and now he has raised them to the best program in the country, right? So I would be fascinated by a lot of those storylines there. But yeah, to me, the class as it looks right now is Georgia and everybody else.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's a lot of good storylines, and I think if it was Michigan, Georgia, I'd like to see Michigan's O-line is going to probably win the best offensive line again in the country for the second straight year. Is how's that line match up physicality wise with that Georgia front? Stetson Bender, another great story, walk-on quarterback going for back-to-back, national championships, which I think would be awesome. And then you have, nobody's given TCU a chance to beat anybody. They come off the Big 12 title game where they lose. Now people are going to say, wow, they snuck into the playoff now. They're going to be a 9-point dog to Michigan. So I think there's a lot of good storylines.
Well, I got one for you with the storyline that you guys didn't bring up. If Georgia destroys Ohio State, destroys Michigan, we always talk about SEC versus Big Ten and who's better. I mean, if Georgia destroys the two best Big Ten teams, that's a huge another debate for later on too.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. There's no doubt.
Your brother-in-law, I think, is confusing. Mike, you can talk about 2002 all you want. We did run through Alabama and Oregon to win the first CFP, so we can omit 02 if you want, but we don't have to, but we can.
But we'll definitely we'll break these games down, guys. I think it'll just be interesting to see how it plays out. I mean, again, Nick, if it's Michigan, Ohio State, I don't know. I don't know if I'll be able to sleep.
Oh, that I know. Yeah, that's what I've said all along. I said I just don't know if my heart can. Oof. I'm still in recovery. I'm still in recovery mode from the Saturday after Thanksgiving. I don't know how I can handle it either way.
I'll tell you what.
I think all the marbles.
I think my motto now every year, because we're always down in North Carolina.
Oh, you can't watch anymore. I think it's already done. Been decided.
I'm done. I won't watch it. I watched the first half. Then we went to the Wake game, and I was watching it on my phone. My brother-in-law kept holding the phone up and saying they're going in for another. And I'm like, come on. I was getting all excited. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. So, guys, for parting shots, I got a small one. I don't have too much. We already talked a little bit about Deion. I'm going to just keep you guys on the screen for it, but we already talked about Deion. The guy's a marketing genius. He's and for the AD to say they don't even have the money to pay him yet, but with all the ticket sales and just all the marketing piece that he's going to bring, the exposure. One thing Colorado's going to be, they're going to be in the bright lights, man. Their game day will be there. I mean, they're going to be back. I think I saw it was Cordell Stewart, a lot of the big alums, Joe Klatt, who I love following Joe Klatt. They were so excited to get him there on campus and just to see the impact he's had in 1 week. I thought was special. I think Deion's going to be a game changer for college football. And I think the one thing that we could all say is, when you talk about the market and pitch that Deion's going to bring, I think Deion's going to have success because of the NIL, because of the transfer portal. Deion fits. I think the new generation of way college football is good. We're going to see it for the next so many years. So I'm excited to see Prime. I've watched his team meeting. I've watched the press conference 2 or 3 times. I'm going to go on and I'm actually buying my first shirt that says Prime Time with his number on the side. I'm buying a Colorado hat, so I'll be pulling for him. I think it's a great story.
Absolutely. I love
Nick,
it.
what do you got tonight for us?
Yeah, I thought maybe just because I'm so close to it after the Ohio State Michigan game, and I'll be honest to say I'm disappointed in the fan base of my favorite college team. Right, somewhere along the way, I feel like we have lost sight of the fact that these are 18 and 22-year-old kids playing college football, and I get it. We talked about it. We'll continue to talk about it. There's money galore, and these kids are getting compensated, which I'm all in favor of. Right. but we had multiple instances of social media attacks on the head coach, on the assistant coaches, on players, on the AD, on former players, on former coaches ganging up now on the current staff and the current program. At some point, we all have to take a deep breath. We love college football. You won't find a bigger college football fan than me. I love it. However, I just think we all have to take a half step back and really, truly understand that these kids are not trying to purposely go in and lose. Okay. Ohio State did not want to lose at home to their arch rival for the second year in a row. They didn't want to do it. Right. So my parting shot is, let's enjoy the games. Let's loot like crazy. Doesn't mean we can't be critical, but let's not get personal and let's not go after these kids. Because I promise you, it is going to impact recruiting to your favorite school. If that word spreads, social media is strong enough, these kids will avoid your school like the plague if they're going to be criticized like that and under a magnifying glass like that. So, again, I just want everybody to take a half step back and realize that we're still watching young men try to play football.
Well, Nick, his overall record speaks for itself. I mean,
Sure.
one of the things I was thinking too is, let's just say, and Michigan, Ohio State, I don't think have ever played twice in one season. I think when they do away with the two conferences, you could see them play twice. It's going to happen sooner or later. But what if they play again and Michigan wins and he loses twice in the same year?
Yeah. How do you survive that? It's awfully tough. It's awfully tough. How do you get through that? Yeah,
But I'm with you. His record speaks for itself. He's not on the hot seat.
I don't think he is either, Rock. But I was more frustrated with going after the players, where some of these fans went after some of the kids. I had more. Look, you're getting paid. Ryan Days get paid $8.5 million. He better be able to take the heat from the fan base, right? But Cade Stover, who's a senior tight end that has played multiple positions for your school because you didn't have defensive ends last year in the Rose Bowl, and he played in the Rose Bowl and had a heck of a game against Utah, and then turned around and played tight end. He didn't want to drop 3 passes against Michigan in the Big Ten against Michigan. He didn't want to do that. He gets death threats. He's getting social media. They're going to his parents' house. Like, come on. Like, we have to be better than that. We just have to be.
Jake, what do you got for us?
Well, I'm going to keep it in the coaching thing with the whole, Jeff Saturday getting hired. I'm kind of on the fence with this. That being a coach myself and done some of the grunt work where you're staying up all night cutting film, even with technology now you didn't have to. But I used to have to drive and meet someone halfway.
Oh yeah,
push the DVDs. Pay your dues. Where like a guy like Jeff Saturday, just here you go. Here's a head coaching job. But looking more into it, Jeff Saturday, he was a student of the game with being the center, and the center knows a lot with the calls and everything. So it's not like he doesn't know football. Where some people, I think it's just like, hey, he hired his fishing buddy off the boat that didn't know anything about football, and now he's running the Colts. But I think it is going to open some doors, and it's going to open some doors for a lot of former players that get their chance to maybe get introduced in that. And where I think even Saturday even said before, and that is like, yeah, I've been approached to coach a lot, but he didn't want to start from the low man on the totem pole. He's always talked about he knew the game. He was there with Peyton. They did all the, basically with Peyton and him, they were probably the 2 offensive coordinators. The offensive coordinator make a suggestion, and those 2 would go with it with protection and everything. So I can see it opening doors, but, I think some people just think it's just someone brand new coming in, just taking over. But I'm interested to see if it'll ever go down to the college where someone gets fired. Let's say Deion gets fired and they go, okay, let's bring in Cordell Stewart to finish off the year just to see. He's a fan favorite. You never know. We'll just get by this year and see how it goes. So this could open the door for a lot of people, former players.
I think PR. I think the key for Saturday is, I think the key was interim head coach. One of the rumors I keep hearing, again, Jim Harbaugh said that he's coming back next year, but I read an article. They said that the Colts are going to come heavy after him for the NFL, but they got to put that to rest. He's not going anywhere. So, well, guys, listen, I appreciate you guys for still coming on. I messed up the date. My bad. We'll get the whole group together on the 28th. We'll break down these 2 semifinal games, and we'll talk the New Year's 6 games in a couple weeks. So I appreciate you guys coming on.
Thanks, Rock. Appreciate it. Always fun.
All right, guys. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Cheers.
See ya.
So thanks to Coach Nicole and thanks to C-Bus for coming on tonight. I had the dates all screwed up. I've been busy the last 2 to 3 weeks, but we will run the full crew. Coach Medicis will be on, Coach Kramer, Coach Nicola, and C-Bus will join me. We're going to shoot for December 28th, which is a Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. We will preview the 2 semifinal games, and then we will break down the New Year's 6 games as well. So as I say all the time on the Rock Pile is where dreams become reality. Have a good evening, everybody.